Hi everybody, it's Annette from the Art of Intuition, and today we're going to talk about analyzing our relationships. Now, this is one of the more challenging parts for our human aspect when we get into looking at our relationships and when they start changing because, well, once we've gotten to certain vibrations, our relationships start to look different. They start to feel different. They don't fit like they used to because we start to see things that aren't balanced in the relationship that we couldn't see before. Because everyone is an aspect of us. Everyone's mirroring something back to us. Now, when you get into the mirroring, it's not as easy sometimes to just say, oh, I always feel disempowered, so I attract someone else that feels disempowered. And sometimes it can work that way. They can be mirroring back. If you have a lot of lack energy, they could be that aspect of you that mirrors that back to you. A very ego aspect of you. Sometimes it's a little bit deeper than that. Sometimes if you're always going smaller, kind of dimming your light, feeling someone's better than you, you're going to call for someone who's going to act like they're better than you to kind of draw that out and for you to see that programming eventually. Like, we don't normally see this stuff right away because in the beginning they're mirroring us in some way. But sometimes it's not that one-to-one correlation of how they're mirroring us, but they are mirroring us in a way. And we kind of have to look at how they are. But we can't really see that till we step out from in front of the mirror. Then they're really no longer a mirroring part of us. So once you are able to see it, what they're mirroring back, what program you're breaking when you're with them, what aspect of them, of you they represent, you get step away from the mirror, you can really start to see what's going on in the relationship and why it might start showing some signs of it. It's possible it might not last through your whole ascension process. A lot of these relationships don't. Some do, some don't. It's never going to be a hard, fast line on what will last and what won't last. So if anyone tries to tell you that, that's not true. Some last, some don't last. It depends on the other people in the relationship and if they can come to an aligned place where everyone is balanced in the relationship. So when you start to figure out what the other person is showing you, a lot of times you start to see the imbalance in the relationship. Like if you're always sharing and you've almost gotten to, I know a lot of relationships I get into, I'm always sharing and I get to the point where I almost feel obligated to do it. And when I don't have anything to share and I can't share, then I get into this energy of, I start clearing a lot of guilt about that and shame about that I can't really give as much as I want to give here. But I've also taken on part of the reality in that part. I've taken on the reality that like now I have to do more to stay in this reality, which isn't true. That's my kind of an old program of mine coming up that I've got to almost overdo to stay in the reality to prove that, I'm worth it. So I've got to do more now to be here. And you start to see the other person's not sharing. It kind of goes back to that old tropes. Look, when people come around, do they come around when everything's great? Or do they just come around when everything's not great? And there can be part of that in a lot of relationships where you only see people when their life is shitty and when they're in a lot of good places, you don't hear from them and you don't see them. They're not sharing that goodness with you. They're just sharing the roughness with you because they want you to kind of help pull them out of that. And a lot of times we'll play that role out. But when it becomes repeated, that's the only time you see them, we really have to look at, okay, why are they showing up now? What is going on here? And sometimes it can even be more subtle than that, where you don't really see that they're doing all these things. And you might not have as much as they have in a monetary way. But when you're going through the ascension journey, money is kind of all over the place. So you really can't get too bogged down on where you are at any point in that journey because you're always kind of break through abundance karma with the money. But money is a good way to kind of explain this in a sense where one person might have a lot more money and the other person might not have that much money, but the other person's not sharing it. And it usually has to get pretty extreme. Usually there are some parts when you don't see it. And you can really only see this. And this is a caveat to this. You really aren't able to see this until you get to a vibration high enough. I don't like the higher or lower, but you get to a vibration where you can start to look at the aspects of you look at this aspect of you. Meaning, once again, you backed away from the mirror. They're really no longer mirroring back at you because you can now see the illusion in it all, and you can see why it's not working. And you can see why it's no longer making you happy. It's starting to agitate you because you're starting to see the imbalance in it. You're starting to see the imbalance, and sometimes it has to get so extreme. Well, one person, if we keep with the money analogy, one person might have, $20,000, the other person might have $200, but the other person won't share any of that money with the other person. Even though the $200 person is sharing everything they have, one way or the other, and the other person's not. And sometimes it can get super extreme because we can't really see it until it's super extreme. Now, that doesn't mean the other person is, not a good person or a selfish person. It just means they're in a human consciousness that they don't see an issue with it. And they also have an expectation that every time they show up, the other person's going to give up everything because that's what they always do. And they feel like they don't have to reciprocate that. They almost like they have a pass and they don't have to do anything. But if we are the other person in that and we've enabled that behavior, we're really just kind of pissed at ourselves because we didn't see it sooner. But we're really not supposed to be pissed at ourselves. When we're working through a lot of this programming, we will be pissed with ourselves. We're like, why didn't I see this? It had to get this extreme for me to see that I'm doing 110%. You want to show up and do 5%. And it's okay. When it's not okay. Respect when you're in your human, when you're living from your human aspect, and respect when you're living from a higher aspect. A lot of things you tolerate it as a human when you live from your human aspect, and when you live from your higher aspect, you just won't tolerate it anymore because it's a whole different bar of looking at a relationship to see, wow, I couldn't see that before. But that's the beauty of when you start increasing your vibration and embodying in all these different aspects, you gain the vision to be able to see. You keep expanding out into your field where you can see so many things. And you couldn't see this stuff before. Now, once you see it, it's kind of hard not to see it. And I know I've gone through this quite a bit lately. Some of it, I think, is the energies of 2022 have been, for some it's been beautiful, for some it's been a little bit more of a kind of roto-rooter kind of ride when you're looking at a lot of stuff. And you just look at stuff and you're able to see stuff you couldn't see before. And you get kind of pissed and you're like, wow, that's pretty jarring. And it seems like now you can't unsee it. And now you have to kind of decide, what am I going to do with this? Am I going to keep this person in my life? Am I going to try to align it? Am I just going to maybe pull back and not share as much? And is it time to have a talk with the other person about kind of what is going on here? Why does this feel so lopsided? Only you're going to know the answer to that. You're going to know how you feel about it. You're going to know how you feel about the other person. And if you feel like it's a relationship that's supposed to try to be aligned, or you just start pulling back. Sometimes when I start pulling back, when I'm starting to see those patterns crop up, and these are also my patterns. So I'm calling forth these people to show me my pattern. But we can get so ingrained in especially relationships that are older, that we don't want to see it. But if a new person showed up and acted this way, we would immediately say no. Because we have all these cords and attachments and stories around the older friendships, the older people that have been around for so long. We have all this stuff wrapped around them that we don't have wrapped around the new people. But disrespect is disrespect. If something's not balanced, it's not balanced. And maybe it was subtle at first because your vibration with that person, what they were mirroring with you, was subtle at first, right? It was close. And the farther you step away from that mirror and back out of that mirror, you're like, well, you can't really mirror this back at me anymore because I'm transcending this program. So now all I'm seeing is a very disrespectful behavior, and it's getting repeated and repeated and repeated. Another clue you're starting to not mirror someone is they start kind of falling out of your life. And when you get them, you might get a different aspect of them, because no matter how conscious you are or how unconscious you think somebody else is, which is really, they're just an unconscious version of you. Really, nobody's unconscious in a sense. They just haven't tapped into, it's not their time yet to become more conscious, right? It's just not their time. And when it's their time, it'll be their time. It's just not their time yet. So when we step away from the mirror and we can start to see everything, we can get angry. But it's important to remember we're just angry at ourselves because we didn't see it. We just hadn't seen it yet. We're just mad at ourselves. We let this go for as long as we let it go. And now we have to kind of decide what we want to do with it. So take a hard look. I don't even have to tell you to take a hard look, because when this is going on, it just becomes so apparent. And a lot of times it will get super extreme, because you start to really see that, wow, I'm carrying a lot of the water in this thing, and this other person's really not. They're just kind of showing up, and they're really not participating, or they really don't want to reciprocate anything on whatever level they could. They're just not doing any. And that's kind of a big sign, when they're not doing anything to even reciprocate anything in the relationship. So relationships can be a rough one when we start trying to align them. It's harder for our ego. It's always going to be hard for our human and our ego. That's when I say it's hard. That's the aspect it's hard for, because you have to take a look, and then we have to decide, what do we do with it? And sometimes that's a bigger decision than when you realize it, because then you got to do something with it. You can't let it continue, because then it's going to start draining your energy, which means it's going to drain your abundance. It's going to start draining everything. So look at who's showing up when they're showing up. Look when they're not showing up. Look at what's mirroring. Look at when you're stepping away from the mirror, which is when you truly are able to see. And keep practicing the art of intuition.